In the process of working with Zach, a man with supernatural abilities, Officer Yilia gradually uncovered the truth about an old unsolved case and the existence of the mastermind, Leland. Zach escaped from Leland's pursuit, approached a public phone, and called Yilia. Using the phone's location, Yilia drove to find him. On her way, she remembered Walter's advice. Zach was not human, and if they couldn't capture him, killing him was the only solution to prevent a potential threat to humanity. Upon meeting, Zach confessed he was now truly alone, a pain he no longer wished to endure alone. Yilia, moved by Zach leaning on her, could not bring herself to shoot him and took him home before heading to work. Briefly, she warned him not to enter her room or face consequences and stated, "I have no sympathy for you. You are still a criminal." Meanwhile, news of a massive website attack the previous night appeared on an electronic billboard, and the car radio reported it as a coordinated hack. The National Scientific Investigative Institute, among 13 affected organizations, had all data erased, including backups. Walter learned from his assistant that other institutes faced the same fate, and he was frustrated. The department head met with Haley, smiling, as no one would now learn about Zach. They blamed the hack on North Korea, securing their future and the creation of a new era. As Haley celebrated with champagne, she expressed her desire for more individuals like Zach, envisioning a time when 101 million such beings could dominate world wealth and prestige. Zach, as the original prototype, was meant to disappear after contributing all his Luca cells, having lived too long already. After these events, the department head looked forward to a promotion to head of the National Intelligence Agency. However, a call about the Institute's chaotic state interrupted their plans. Upon arrival, the department head, in a fury, slapped the unconscious Levi and reprimanded Yvonne, who explained the situation. Despite their protests, he ordered researchers to awaken Levi at any cost. Once awake, an exhausted Levi sought out Leland, requesting a strength-enhancing injection, despite the risks. Yvonne also wanted the injection, valuing the benefits over the potential to turn into a monster. Leland, seeing their determination, administered the injection to Levi and explained the side effects to Yvonne, who accepted them without hesitation. Levi then stopped Leland, urging him not to inject Yvonne due to the severe pain involved. After work, Yilia bought Zach a full set of men's clothes. While he was changing, she secretly called Walter to update him on the situation, but did not mention that Zach was at her house. Walter still advised her to hand Zach over to the police. During the call, Walter nearly hit Yvonne, who was disguised as a passerby. After checking the situation and returning to his car, Levi, who was hiding inside, subdued him. Meanwhile, Zach was awakened by the sound of thunder outside. He discovered the case files Yilia had hidden behind a curtain and saw a family photo from her childhood. Recalling his past visits to Yilia's home, he showed her the photo, prompting a serious conversation. Walter woke from unconsciousness to find Levi demanding information on Zach. After 2 doses of ethanol, Walter, in a daze, revealed the information. Tanner then retrieved the documents, and Levi sped up the car, submerging both Walter and the vehicle in a raging river. Yilia reattached the photo to the wall and reminisced about the past. She became a police officer after her parents disappeared when she was 10. Oddly, everyone connected to her father was either dead or missing. Despite 10 years on the force, she had not found her parents. Zach seemed her only lead to uncovering the truth, with Leland holding the key to restoring Zach's memory. She hoped Zach was the killer of her parents, so it would all be over without starting anew. Previously, she could tell if someone was good just by looking at them, except for Zach. The next morning, Yilia couldn't reach Walter by phone. As she was about to text him, Calvert entered with a grave face. Hesitant, he didn't directly mention Walter's death, but took her to the National Scientific Research Institute. Learning of Walter's death en route, Yilia rushed in, devastated. She visited the river where Walter's incident occurred and broke down crying. Back home, Yilia drank heavily and spoke in despair, viewing Walter as a father figure. During her low point, Tanner tampered with her car. After calming down, Yilia requested an investigation warrant from Calvert. Walter never drank, so it was unlikely he was drunk driving. Calvert told her the case was closed by the prosecutor's office without direct evidence, making a search warrant impossible. This led to a heated argument between them, ending on bad terms. Jack intervened, suggesting Yelia could start an investigation around Walter's periphery, but she had to do it quietly. At the institute, she asked an assistant about the professor's last days. The assistant mentioned the hack that erased all data, which greatly affected the professor, though he never drank. After cleaning the professor's office, Yelia drove off, followed secretly by Levi's group. Tanner used computer technology to stop her car midway, and Levi quickly knocked her out and took her away. Soon, Yelia's abduction, along with her car, made the news, with only a knife left by Levi at the scene. Zach, who had just finished cooking, saw the news and immediately understood. He rushed to Yates's house and asked him to call Levi. Levi told him that if he continued to run, he would kill everyone connected to Zach. Zach replied he would no longer run and would wait for them to bring Yelia. After hanging up the phone, Levi boldly confessed to Yelia that he had killed Walter and mentioned that she and Zach would soon join him. Despite Yates's objections, Zach forcefully borrowed his car and phone, which were still under loan. Before leaving, he thanked Yates, acknowledging him as his only friend in the world. In the underground parking lot of a mall, after confirming Yelia was safe, Zach set a meeting point with Levi. Levi ordered Tanner to kill Yelia immediately if anything went wrong. He and Yvonne entered the mall to search for Zach. Seizing the opportunity, Zach cut the garage's power cable and engaged in a struggle with Tanner, eventually stunning him with electricity. After finding a hiding spot, Zach seriously told Yelia that he would distract them, and if he survived, he would find her. He emphasized that only if she lived could the truth be uncovered. Despite Yelia's objections, Zach stunned her and drove away before Levi could catch up. Meanwhile, Yvonne noticed Tanner was missing. They tracked him using his phone signal. Zach smashed his own phone and demanded to know who they really were. Tanner, with a military background, coldly responded that he would not talk and that killing him would only lead to endless pursuit like a rat across the street. After Zach hit him several times and applied electricity to his wounds, causing severe pain, he allowed Levi's men to rescue Tanner and secretly followed them. He followed them all the way to the institute and entered, but Levi had already spotted him. After injuring Zach with a metal ruler, Levi stated that killing him would reveal everything. Despite Levi's enhanced combat skills, Zach was quickly overwhelmed and knocked unconscious. After a few more kicks from Levi, the institute's staff carried him inside. Through the thick glass door, the director corrected Leland's intention to send someone in to treat him, suggesting they should wait and observe Zach's regenerative abilities. After the performance tests, they planned to start a cultivation project immediately. He pulled an assistant aside and instructed him to clone Zach's somatic cells secretly, noting that cloning a person was now effortless for them. Despite this, Levi felt no relief but told Yvonne that the war had just begun. On the other hand, as soon as Yelia returned to the police station, Calvert took her to the interrogation room. He instructed Jack that no fourth person should enter except them. Now suspecting they had fallen into a trap, he went straight into the interrogation room. He bluntly asked her about Zach's whereabouts, mentioning he'd heard about the church fire but was not pursuing responsibility for it now. However, Yelia, genuinely unaware of Zach's location, chose to wear handcuffs rather than divulge information. Despite Calvert's efforts, he couldn't make her speak. Out of options, he arranged for her to be given a bowl of the thick soup typically served to prisoners, and then went with Jack to search her home. When Zach woke up, he saw Leland standing before him, comforting him like a loving father and telling him he was home. The assistant outside saw through Leland's intentions, realizing he wanted to use paternal affection to persuade Zach willingly to be an experimental subject, remarking that the director was a terrifying person. Zach still struggled to accept the fact that he had suddenly gained a father upon waking up, while Leland continued to persuade him in a fatherly tone. "Child, no matter what happens, I am your father." After learning the man's identity, Zach was persuaded. Leland continued to refine his persuasive techniques, leaving Zach tearful. At Yelia's home, Calvert found no trace of Zach, but discovered one of his hairs. Just as he was about to leave, he sharply noticed case documents behind a curtain. During a meal, Leland clarified Zach's amnesia and casually mentioned Xavier, falsely claiming Xavier had planned to sell him for money. Watching the monitors, the assistant reminded the director that time was up. Zach's regenerative and healing abilities were now more than 10 times that of a normal human. Leland's pocket watch also reminded him, and he quickly ended the conversation, telling Zach that Xavier's fate was for him to find. He posed 2 questions to Zach. Is humanity in its current form correct? Must we be the last humans? Before finding answers, Zach must endure all pain. After saying this, Leland put on a gas mask. By the time Zach sensed something was wrong, he had already collapsed from a potent anesthetic gas. Leland, exhausted, instructed his assistant to take Zach to the lab. Back in the interrogation room, Calvert handed Yilia his phone with photos he took at her home. He had guessed that Yilia had been secretly investigating her parents' disappearance for years. The interrogation room was no longer suitable for questioning. It was better to talk over drinks. After a drink, Calvert opened up about a case he investigated about 20 years ago, involving a missing husband, where suspicion fell on the wife. Although the case was eventually closed as the prosecution period expired, he felt fulfilled having done his duty. He wished Yilia could see that her parents' disappearance, also past the prosecution period, meant even if the culprit was found, the law could do nothing. Yilia felt that a prosecution period dictating how long a victim should grieve was a joke. Calvert said that was the law and hoped Yilia would stop her investigation to avoid being reported. He had been tormented by the disappearance case for years and did not want Yilia to suffer the same fate. After finishing the second drink and crying, Yilia firmly replied that she would not stop, even if it meant going to jail. This path was hers alone to walk. Calvert, moved, told Yilia he would pretend not to know about the past and would delete the photos, but if higher-ups discovered her actions, he couldn't help. Yilia added a new sticky note to the wall with information about Walter's death and a 10-year-old blue flash. She worried about Zach's whereabouts, unaware that Zach was currently restrained in a chair, unable to move. In the office, Haley remarked it had been a long time since the 3 of them had gathered. The director flattered her, saying they met because good things were coming. Leland noted Zach's situation was not optimistic. They needed to destroy the weaker cells in his body, leaving only the strong, pure cells for cloning. Haley looked forward to the future. These cells would become their consortium's angelic sons. She planned to prepare enough surrogate mothers for the project. After the 2 left, Leland went to the lab and instructed his subordinates to intensify the shocks on Zach until he could no longer bear it. If Zach's heart stopped, they were to perform CPR immediately until revival. If cell evolution was confirmed, several more years of antibody reaction tests would follow. He hoped they would prepare well. Outside the research institute, Haley instructed the director that once the plan succeeded, they would eliminate everyone at the institute, including Leland and Zach, the so-called divine child. It would be disastrous if it leaked that Zach was man-made. Of course, she planned to keep the director by her side to build a glorious new era together. After driving away, the director sneered, calling her a cruel woman. The experiment soon began, and under the stimulation of 7,000 watts of electric current, smoke billowed from Zach's body. He remembered his childhood. Leland indeed was his father, and a monster like him. Leland justified himself using Pavlov's experiment and then signaled his assistant to increase the current. Zach convulsed in pain and eventually passed out. In the morning, Calvert called Jack to his office, and they tacitly agreed to keep secrets. Jack brought Yilia a drink and discussed the group that kidnapped her, noting they were the same people from the subway station and used a cloned car. Yilia felt these people were not only professional, but also highly organized. Jack was intrigued, but couldn't join rashly. Yilia then spoke about her investigation into Leland. Despite Zach's pleas, Leland increased the electric current. Zach's screams echoed throughout the institute over 3 inhumane weeks. During this time, Haley and the director made final preparations for their plan. Yilia visited the prison where Leland was held. She noticed that one day, a lawyer just sent money without seeing him. The warden explained that this usually meant the lawyer didn't want to meet or was running errands. The person who hired the lawyer to send money to Leland was Jewel. Back home, Yilia organized her data and then noticed unusual electricity usage at the institute. She consulted the power utility, and the staff told her such high usage could only mean a large underground cold storage at the institute. That day was the final day of the plan. The director told Levi and Yvonne to give their all. When he mentioned his earlier promise to give Zach's right arm to Levi, he was nonchalant, which upset Levi. After the final check, Leland told Zach that the Luca cells had been extracted from his body. Soon, children like him would be born from surrogate mothers, and this time, they would have no chance to escape. With one injection, Zach could rest in peace. Zach slowly told him, "You can't kill me. I will survive and kill you all." Before executing the sentence, Leland took the poison needle, claiming he would personally end Zach, advising him to live well. Secretly, Leland told Zach the escape route and switched the poison needle with a strength-enhancing drug, his final act as a father. Meanwhile, Yilia arrived at the institute. After subduing a researcher, she brought him to the underground laboratory. The researcher seized an opportunity to escape and called several men in black. Yilia, fearless, pulled out a collapsible baton and fought them fiercely. In the corridor, Haley met Leland and congratulated him, saying, "The first act has finally ended. Please keep up the hard work." She expressed regret as Zach's mother over his death. In the laboratory, after convulsing, Zach revived fully and sat up. Suddenly, with sparks and loud rumbling, the institute was paralyzed. Realizing something was wrong, Levi instructed Yvonne to cover the director as they evacuated. They perfectly missed Yilia. After awakening, Zach became even stronger, and Levi was no match for him. As the background music started, he was beaten by Zach until he vomited blood. Zach entered Leland's office but found no trace of him. In anger, he threw a bottle labeled Z0 and smashed it, roaring Leland's name. Levi, enduring severe pain, injected himself in the neck with a syringe and also knocked out Yvonne, who tried to help, before going to find Zach alone. Leaving the office, Zach was confronted by several men in black. Without hesitation, he attacked fiercely, quickly, knocking them all down. Yilia arrived just in time to witness this and tried to leave with Zach. However, Zach insisted on finding Leland first. As they were speaking, Levi attacked. Yilia was thrown into the next room, uncovering the Institute's dark secret of experimenting on babies. After securing the infants, Zach unleashed a powerful electric discharge, blasting both her and Levi away. Before the explosion, Zach managed to rescue Yilia and the infants, taking the severely injured Yilia to the hospital. Besides pleading with the doctors to save her, he could do nothing else. After the surgery, the doctor suggested she remain hospitalized for observation due to her rare injuries. Watching Yilia asleep on the hospital bed, Zach felt a mix of emotions and repeatedly apologized while holding her hand. The Institute's directors were displeased with Zach's escape. Just as the director ordered a hold on any action, Haley slapped him hard, furious that her billions in investment were wasted. The director slapped her back and reassured her that there was still a chance to turn things around by recapturing Zach, which could not only recover the costs, but also buy virtually anything in the world. He pledged his loyalty for that moment, emphasizing that capturing Zach and Yilia and rebuilding the Institute and its research were priorities. Speechless, Haley allowed the director to proceed with the necessary actions, including retrieving the backup frozen embryos from the Institute. Leaving the church, the director asked who Leland planned to collaborate with. Hesitant, Leland said he would side with the most ambitious person. Seizing the opportunity, the director volunteered himself, mentioning that only one embryo needed to be publicized, and he could handle the rest for profit. In return, he could reveal Leland's creation of a new human race, gaining both fame and fortune. Leland, still concerned, feared that once these beings appeared, humanity might be doomed. The director scoffed, believing humans were the most brutal species and not easily destroyed. In the morning, when Calvert and his team arrived at the Institute, it was already surrounded by reporters. Curious about the horrific scene inside, he wondered what had happened. The only survivor accused Yilia of stealing the Institute's secrets and colluding with thugs to attack the place. In the hospital, Zach heard this news from a broadcast. The attending nurse verified Yilia's information and called the police. In an urgent situation, Zach didn't hesitate. He pushed Yelia's stretcher, knocking down doctors in his way, and carried her to the underground parking garage. He then drove away with her. Under a bridge, Zach disclosed the information Leland had told him. Yelia still believed the police could handle the situation, but Zach hesitated before informing her of the harsh reality that her home was no longer safe. The scene had been fabricated in just a few hours, and the media had been bribed, turning them into public enemies. They were up against formidable opponents, and their current priority was to understand the full situation. In the evening, Yates hummed a tune as he returned home. Seeing Yelia at the desk, he thought he had entered the wrong house. His doubt disappeared when he saw Zach rising from the sofa to get a drink. Remembering his car and phone had been forcibly taken, Yates was furious. He had reported his car stolen at the police station, but the complicated procedures left him cold. Despite agreeing not to meet again, not only had they met, but Zach had also brought his girlfriend home. Yelia corrected him. "I'm not his girlfriend. I'm a police officer." Upon hearing this, Yates's attitude changed dramatically. "Oh, officer, Zach is my best friend. You can stay as long as you like." Meanwhile, Leland stabilized the dying Levi with an injection. After he left, Haley started cozying up to Levi and Yvonne, hoping they would side with her and monitor the chief in return. She offered two things as a reward: the truth about a friendly fire incident during their military service and something they desired. On TV, a researcher was smearing Yelia, and the media listed alleged evidence of Yelia profiting under false pretenses. Unable to listen further, Yelia stepped outside for fresh air. Zach followed to comfort her but didn't know how to start. Yelia had seen through their motives. They aimed to cover up the Institute's dark secrets. She believed there must still be traces left in the Institute that could lead to finding Leland and uncovering the truth. Zach, recalling Leland's deceiving words, seemed uncertain, but Yelia was determined to face the harsh truth bravely. Since their paths diverged, Yelia planned to go it alone. Back inside, they overheard Yates calling the police. After he hung up, the situation became awkward. Zach used an electric discharge to disable Yates's phone, and while Yates went to fix it, Zach reassured Yelia, "You're not alone." In the early hours, Yelia quietly went downstairs and called Calvert. After briefly explaining the situation, they arranged to meet on the first floor of the Institute. Calvert then called another number, speaking to the chief, who instructed him to kill Yelia if she didn't comply, as she might eventually uncover an old case where the chief had committed murder. At the Institute, Yelia met Calvert, who revealed that even if she could open the secret door to the basement, it had been stripped bare. He explained that people like them couldn't defeat such powerful opponents. The only way out was for Yelia to reveal Zach's whereabouts, at least sparing one of them. Seeing her tears and resolute expression, Calvert realized that persuasion was futile and walked away, leaving Yelia to several black-clad men armed with clubs. As they overwhelmed her, Zach arrived just in time. After knocking out Calvert, he defeated the men. As they tried to leave, Calvert blocked their path. Zach shielded Yelia from a bullet, and she took Calvert down with a judo throw, but ultimately couldn't bring herself to harm him further. Neither wanted to linger in battle, so they left together. By dawn, the media reported Yelia for resisting arrest and assaulting an officer, revealing her real identity. Disturbed by the news, Yelia excused herself to the restroom to wash her hands, needing a moment to process the events. The pursuers arrived quickly, giving her no time to catch her breath. Jack quickly led his team to their location. Sensing danger, Zach hurriedly grabbed her and they left. On the rooftop, they saw a large team coming to search for them. They were all Yelia's former colleagues. She couldn't bear to hurt them. So, they cleverly escaped the building by using the terrain to their advantage. After settling Levi and Yvonne, the director asked Leland about the status of the fertilized eggs. Leland replied that they were ready and would be implanted in the mothers after 3 weeks of cultivation. The remaining embryos would be handed over to him once they successfully divided. The director was pleased and mentioned he would also take care of Zach during this time. Meanwhile, Zach and Yilia took a car to Ruyun Ranch. Before they left during the day, Yates wrote down the address and mentioned it was Zach's favorite place. After driving all night, they arrived at the ranch and spent the next 3 months living a carefree and happy life. However, one evening, the media reported Dr. Jin from the institute had been silenced, labeling it a suicide. Yilia, who was sunbathing, instantly became gloomy, knowing another innocent person had died because of her. She told Zach it was time to leave. They had been avoiding the real world for too long. That night, a storm broke out at the ranch, and Yilia, troubled by her thoughts, sat outside for a while. She reminisced about her moments with Zach. Indeed, she wanted to live a secluded life here forever. When she went back inside, she found Zach also sitting outside. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and tears flowed freely. Under the thunderstorm, the couple completed a solemn ceremony. Elsewhere, Yvonne secretly copied all the data from the institute. By the time the director realized and sent Levi to capture her, she had already driven away. In the morning, Yilia tried to reach for her pants under the bed while Zach was cooking, but Zach discovered her. After a silent breakfast, they watched the sunrise from the window and talked about the future. Last night's storm had comforted Yilia's heart, but after the rain stopped, she felt it was unrealistic to stay. The real world was outside, where despite the pain and even death, they needed to face it. Seeing her determination, Zach pleaded for her to stay one more day before leaving. During their walk, Zach shared what Leland had told him about Xavier. He withheld the part about Xavier wanting to sell him for money, only emphasizing, "Your father was a good man. He took me in because he felt sorry for me." He worried Leland's words might be true, which would be too cruel for Yilia. He tried to make her forget the past, but it was clearly impossible. In the church, Leland observed the conditions of 3 pregnant women on his computer. The embryos had been implanted, and in about 10 months, they would give birth to children stronger than Zach. As long as they received regular injections, there was nothing to worry about. The director imagined the future where Haley would declare these children as the children of angels, thereby draining the believers' wallets. He then demanded the embryos from Leland, planning to sell them for a large sum of money and enjoy his retirement. Even if Haley realized, he could shift the blame to Yvonne, who had fled with the data. When they opened the refrigerator, they were shocked to find it empty. The embryos had vanished. The section chief was furious. He questioned Leland about the whereabouts of the fertilized eggs. After calming down, they both thought of Yvonne. She was now back to having black hair, standing in Haley's luxury villa, guarded by professionals. She hoped Haley would keep her promise. All she wanted was Levi's freedom. She would hand over the data and the eggs when the time was right. If Haley broke her word, she was ready to kill her. That night, Yilia was awakened by noises outside. She found Zach sadly holding a dead lamb, which had been frail since birth. She had hoped it would grow strong, but realized it could not escape the natural cycle of survival of the fittest. Seeing him so upset, Yilia decided to stay a few more days. They enjoyed several more months of carefree and joyful life. One day, Yilia handed Zach a pregnancy test, silently telling him he was going to be a father. Zach hugged her joyously, but Yilia's face showed no happiness. Meanwhile, at the institute, Leland was checking on the pregnant women. The section chief noted that the children were still healthy. Haley, not wanting any complications after decades of waiting for this era of glory, was relieved. They discussed the missing Yvonne. Haley hinted that the section chief should always be loyal to her, even if it meant being discarded first. After their conversation, Haley left in her car, unaware that Levi was following her to the villa. He just spotted Yvonne when the section chief called to check in. Hesitating, he reported nothing unusual. Yilia, getting up to drink water, was troubled by strong fetal movements. Zach quickly helped her to bed to rest, worried about the child's future. He feared the child could be like him and hoped it would be just like its mother. Regardless of the destruction it might cause, he would not let the child live a life like his. He paid Yates to create fake identities for them. Zach was slightly dissatisfied seeing the nationality as Chinese on the documents. Yates assured him, saying China was a great power capable of rivaling the US. Zach explained it was also for the child, who was due next month. At dawn, Haley took the 3 pregnant women to the church. which would be the sacred place for the children's birth. The believers cheered upon seeing them. Only the section chief was distracted. Zach and Yelia also packed their bags, ready to go to the hospital. Before leaving, they joyously took wedding photos. Soon after, Yelia was wheeled into the operating room. The birthing process was agonizing for the women. One did not survive, resulting in a stillbirth. The energy released knocked Leland away, but Yelia successfully gave birth. Zach, too excited to control his electric charge, signaled that he would hold the baby after a few days. The failure of the birth left Leland and his team dejected. The fetal energy was far beyond human tolerance. Haley, uninterested in excuses, demanded to know the next steps. The section chief, impatient and having wasted over 20 years on the project, was ready to quit. After calming down, he called Levi, needing him to capture Zach back. In the early hours, Levi handed the documents to Calvert. Haley met Yvonne again, asking about the eggs. Yvonne repeated her terms: Levi's safety first, or no deal. To prove her sincerity, Haley brought her ally Zachary. He revealed the truth about a past incident in the military where they accidentally killed a peer, all orchestrated by the section chief. This was an old method to push someone to the bottom and then rescue them, earning their eternal gratitude. Of course, she didn't like this method. Restoring her and Levi's reputation was virtually impossible, but she could give them new identities and money. In the hospital, the couple was still reminiscing about the beauty of their daughter and discussing names. Yates sent a message to Zach that the new IDs had arrived. Zach planned to go himself. His daughter needed to be registered at birth soon. After receiving the items, Yates refused to take his money and handed over a bag of nutrients as a gift to bless them. On her way to the newborn room to pick up her daughter, Yelia heard the news on TV. The police had found 2 bodies at a car accident scene. They were her parents, who had been missing for years. The National Institute of Science investigation speculated that the car had been attacked with high-voltage electricity. She called Jack to inquire about the situation. Jack, cautious, secretly used his mobile phone outside to call Yelia. He also found Xavier's case odd, but could only trust the Institute's word. She asked Jack to obtain DNA from Xavier's remains for further plans. After hanging up, Calvert noticed Jack's unusual behavior and secretly ordered a check on the call records. When Zach returned to the hospital, he didn't find Yelia and their daughter, only a shoe he had prepared for his daughter on the floor. He urgently asked the on-duty doctor to review the surveillance, which revealed the truth. With Calvert's tip-off, Levi and Tanner had easily found Yelia. Levi, threatening the child's life, forced Yelia to follow them. Along the way, he guessed the child was Yelia and Zach's. Back home, staring at the shoe, Zach's anger surged. He released a strong electric charge, and after a loud bang, the house where he and Yelia had lived for a long time collapsed.